Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. As we begin the countdown to the supplementary elections on Saturday, in the 5 states of the Northeast, North Central, and Northwest, several questions remain unanswered, despite INEC's statement that elections were declared inconclusive because the margin of victory was less than the cancelled votes in each of the states. This has led to tension between the two main opposition political parties in the states, the People's Democratic Party and the All Progressive Congress. Joining us now to speak on power play during the supplementary elections and more is Public Affairs Analyst Wale Oluwade. Welcome to the program, Mr. Oluwade.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Good morning.
Yes, let's start from the very recent pronouncement by INEC. One, the reversal of itself in the Bauchi case, that there will be no supplementary election. They will be going back to the collation of the result. And of course, the case of Rivers, which INEC has said is going to resume the collation of results. What's your take on these two issues? Thank you
once again, Emmanuel. My view is pretty well known. I was here yesterday, and I said, everything I think, maybe just to give further clarifications. The reruns, as it were, are a contrivance. There was no basis for reruns in those elections. And I give you, my justification for saying that. Take Bauchi that you mentioned, for instance. The local government at issue was or is Tafawa Balewa local government. And that local government collation agent, a lady, had the results in her custody. And she was about to, in fact, the results had been announced. She now took it to the state collation office. But the state returning officer refused, to accept the results that were already declared, from her, alleging, that there were violence, from the local government. Because by the time the lady was about to announce them, of course, thugs and hoodlums began to foment trouble just to achieve this predetermined outcome of, to declare, the results inconclusive. So there was a clear winner in Bauchi. And another issue from Bauchi is that, there was a difference of 2,533, votes scored by either of the candidates, I think APC, and before you knew what was going on, that figure had, spiked to 25,000. So this so-called rerun is a contrivance, and it's a direct play from the playbook, which is called Osun State. I'm involved in the Osun Election Petition Tribunal, so I know exactly. I've attended the tribunal, sitting, somewhere in Abuja. I've heard unimaginable testimony from witnesses, and I could not believe, that this kind of thing would happen, in a democracy, in a so-called democracy in the 21st century. What plays out during elections? Because, the president refused to assent to the Electoral Act Amendment Bill, last year. He gave all kinds of reasons. And one of the defects in our electoral system that amendment bill was meant to kill is the gap between actual voting, and announcement of results at the polling unit. And then before you now move from the polling units where results have been announced, from ECA 8 have been, signed by all the party agents and copies given to all of them. Now, from that point on, they move to the local government headquarters, the Ward Collation Center, and from there to the states. So you see this gap. The amendment bill, to the Electoral Act was meant to cut out this gap, because it is in this gap that you have the opportunity for political players, to game the system, as it were, to manipulate. Because, like I asked yesterday, what do you think, Emmanuel, what do you think political players, contestants, what do you think they do after voting has been done? What do you think they do when collation is going on? You think they sit down and just fold their arms waiting for announcement of results? That's not what they do. They work the phones. So they have agents in all the polling units. So they're busy calling the agents. What is the scores? What is going on? So once they begin to sense that things are not going the way they expect to their own favor, then they begin to, bring in sinister activities, to change the course of the elections that are already, the ballots that are already cast. In Osun State, that I'm privy to, I mean, we witnessed how scores were reduced from a certain, candidate and added to the opponents. We saw how, I mean, scores of the PDP candidates were actually reduced to eventually close the gap, so that they could now say, okay, there is the gap of, I mean, the quantum of cancelled votes, is higher than the gap between the two. And that's what is playing out in all these states. So INEC, trying to dial back on some of this, the backlash of the public, said, okay, no, because the result, they set up a committee to examine the report of what transpired in Bauchi, and they found out that there was no basis for the state returning officer to have taken the decision he unilaterally took without justification. And so tomorrow, 19th, the coalition that was stopped is going to continue tomorrow in Bauchi, and whoever emerges the winner, which we all know that to be PDP, will be announced. Now, if you take that to Adamawa, what is at play in Adamawa? There's a gap of 32,000, votes between PDP, Umar Fintiri, and the sitting governor, Jibrila Bindo. Now, the state returning officer, the same thing, says it cannot declare a winner. It's inconclusive. Why? Because there's a registered voters of council votes is about 40,000 of registered voters in 44 polling units. But that's not the point. The point is that it's not registered voters that are at play, but number of PVCs collected by those 40,000 voters. Even there is a question mark on this so-called 40,000, it's probably 32, but let's even assume it is 40. But those who actually collected PVCs in that 44 polling units are 31,000. So assuming, which is not possible, that these 31,000 who collected PVCs in these 44 polling units actually vote for APC, they still can't catch up, they can't overturn, override the 32,000 plus votes that Umar Fintiri of PDP, is leading. So why do you declare that result in Adamawa inconclusive? And I can go on, and that brings to point the issue of the double standards of INEC, the duplicitousness, at play, with INEC officials in these elections. Ogun State, I'm an indigene of Ogun State. The gap between APC, Dapo Abiodun, and Akinlade of APM is about 19,000 votes. I think council votes in Ogun State about 20,000. So, but INEC went ahead, to declare Dapo Abiodun a clear winner, regardless of the thin, very thin, margin of that separates both candidates. So this duplicitousness, this double standards, reinforces the belief, in the public minds that, this is just INEC playing a script, to predetermine outcomes. And then when you talk about Rivers State, of course, the sore thumb in these 2019 elections, the shame of our nation is the debacle, what transpired in Rivers. That is not democracy. That is the low watermark of, in our 20 years, post-military dictatorship in this Fourth Republic. What transpired in Rivers State, by all men of good conscience, we should all rise up in unison and condemn it in the strongest possible terms. The deployment of military, I said yesterday, I'm saying it again, the nuclear device in this old election, that took the game completely, that removed it from being an electoral contest to like a military warfare, is the deployment of military. Because the presence of the military in a so-called democratic space is anathema. It's an aberration. It's unimaginable. I grew up, I cut my teeth. I grew up, to age of awareness under military dictatorship, and the scary thought for me to witness military, the way it was deployed in Rivers State, and the atrocities that they perpetrated, ransacking homes, barricading, streets, obviously preventing people from voting. And then the height of it, they went to the state's collation center and prevented the INEC officials from carrying out their constitutional duties. What else do you say, Emmanuel? So all of this, because the fear going towards Saturday reruns, even though Bauchi is off the table, so we have reruns in 5 states, Benue, Plateau, and Sokoto, Adamawa, and Kano. The fear is that, and like I said, it's a play, you know, it's a borrowed strategy from the so-called Osun playbook. The fear is because we know what happened in Osun State. The 22nd September elections, you know, was credible to all intents and purposes, bar, you know, at the collation when they began to manipulate figures to arrive at, oh, the gap is 353, so we need to have a rerun, you know. And then, of course, we all saw what played out on the day of the rerun, the 27th of September, where, you know, the role the police played and the thugs that were imported into Osun State, you know, on that day, we saw what happened in just 7 polling units. I mean, the elections in those 7 polling units supposedly were cancelled on the allegation that they were violence. Now, if INEC cancelled elections in those 7 polling units on the 22nd of September based on violence, now we saw worse acts of brigandage and violence on the 27th. Yet INEC that should outrightly, you know, cancel those rerun and declare the outcome of the 22nd as the valid, you know, outcome of the elections. But they went ahead, you know, to announce a winner and say go to court. Because so the fear going into Saturday's rerun is that we hope there won't be military deployments. We hope, I mean, state institutions, especially INEC, the electoral management body, would truly stand up to its name of being independent. Because so far, I don't think INEC has played has stood up, you know, to the appellation of being independent, you know, based on everything that we witnessed in these 2019 elections.
Well, you've been bashing INEC, but let us also point out that the issue of those who collected their PVCs, we should mention in the case of Adamawa, out of that 40,000, yes, the law does not recognize those who collected PVCs, but registered voters. And because for INEC to do otherwise, will be using their discretion as against what the law states. Registered voters is what the law recognizes, not those who collected PVCs.
Well, so why can't INEC apply the same standards across board? Why are you selective in the application of the rules? You know, elections in Kogi State, either senatorial or House of Reps, I can't remember which one exactly, you know, there were margins, you know, they were either close or whatever, and INEC went ahead, they didn't declare it inconclusive. And there are other places like that. I just told you about Ogun State. You know, the gap is razor thin. You know, I mean, probably if you do proper ballot counting, you could actually even see that, you know, probably there's a stalemate or the other person is the victor and not whoever has been declared. But INEC went ahead, you know, to declare someone, you know, a winner. So if INEC is saying what the law says is to stand on registered voters and not PVC collection, we understand that. So, but apply the same rules across board. You know, don't be selective. Don't cherry pick when to apply the rule as it is, and then in other places, you know, you close your eyes and do something else. Take, for instance, INEC impartiality that I'm talking about. In the North, in the February 23rd presidential elections and March 9th, but especially the presidential elections, INEC guidelines and rules says that if card reader machines do not work, you know, there will be no elections. Elections, whatever elections are conducted without card reader machines will be deemed to be null and void. But what went on in most parts of the North, the card reader machines did not function. And so people resorted to voting, you know, by using, manual voting, manual accreditation. And people voted. And so you had these huge numbers that were returned. But guess what? In the southern part of Nigeria, majority of the places, either the INEC officials didn't turn up on time, and when they did turn up, what happened? Not only the card reader machines function, they function so perfectly that at the end of the day, tens of millions of people could not vote, Emmanuel. So that is the duplicitousness. I mean, like I said, if INEC has set out guidelines, and the Constitution does give them the right to, you know, set out guidelines and policies, you know, to conduct elections, to give us free, fair, credible elections, then stick by the guidelines. Apply the rules, you know, even-handedly across board. Do not be selective. You know, don't apply the rules here and different set of rules there. That's my take.
Well, clearly you do not agree with INEC that, you know, elections, supplementary elections are part of the democratic process, and that elections have gotten better for us to have supplementary elections. Because INEC says, you know, it is just a way of allowing the people have their say and depriving the devious politicians of having their way. Because these supplementary elections will now afford those whose votes were cancelled because of thuggery, overvoting, and card reader malfunctioning now have their say a second time. Clearly, you do not see it as that. You describe it almost as a poison chalice. What is so wrong in having supplementary elections?
The idea of supplementary election is a novelty. Well, not novelty per se, but it's a unique policy, you know, to make sure that, you know, I mean, when there is a stalemate, as it were, you know, or just like the principle says, the gap between two leading contestants, you know, there needs to be a clear winner because of invalid votes or cancelled votes for whatever reason. So you give them those electorates the opportunity to have a say in who governs them. That is the principle, you know, and so that's the ideal. But I'm telling you, when I started, I said, we forget the role that politicians, political actors, the role they play. Most of these so-called cancellations, this violence necessitating this inconclusivity that results in a rerun, they were predetermined, they were orchestrated. That's actually the best way to describe it. You know, because I know politicians sit down and they begin to watch as the results are trooping in because they have their agents there, so most of them have war rooms, so they are doing the tabulation. And as they begin to see, you know, that it's not turning out in their own favor, some of those incidences of violence that you see are instigated to achieve this outcome. So when you actually pander to these sinister dark forces, you are rewarding crime. You are rewarding electoral offenses. You know, you are rewarding them with this second opportunity. And of course, if the system were clean, if the system was fair, unbiased, and transparent, if we could vouch for INEC and the security agencies, fantastic. Nobody will be afraid of a rerun. But the situation where the objective is to, you know, narrow, you know, I mean, isolate a few states as it is now, and then you deploy what we commonly refer to here as state resources, the apparatus of state. I mean, if you've seen the dailies this morning, the president himself has come out to say, I mean, invariably confirming that he's under intense pressure from some of the governors of these states and even some of their brother governors for them to game the system. And he's saying, I mean, I saw it on 3 or 4 headlines of the dailies this morning, that he is going to be impartial. He's not going to influence INEC. Why should the president have to say that I'm not going to influence INEC, if INEC hitherto has not been, you know, subject to being influenced, you know? So I do not agree entirely with, especially these ones, because look at it, Adesua. In the 6 states that INEC hitherto declared inconclusive, PDP, you know, was leading in 5 of those states, you know? And I can tell you, how do you justify Benue State? Samuel Otom, the governor of the PDP, is leading with 81,000 votes. The council vote is 121,000. So there's a gap of 81,000 votes. Are you suggesting, can we just fathom that this 121,000 people, all of them would come out on the 23rd, and that all of them, or 90,000 of the 120,000, will not actually vote for APC? Is that what you think in Benue State? You know, so you begin, when you stretch the logic, because that's what it is, you know, the logic is being stretched. So, I mean, when you begin to stretch it like that, you give room for somebody like me to impute other motives, you know, dark motives. And of course, like I said, we're not saying this because we do not have an example. Osun State is a classic example. What is playing out is a play, you know, from the Osun playbook.
All right, Mr. Oluwade, since these political actors have actually orchestrated this, what some people are calling the crash and burn system of probably trying to disrupt elections so that they can have supplementary elections subsequently, what do you think INEC should do to ensure that things like this are not recurrent, knowing that some of these things are not just by omission, but more by commission?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Aaron. Exactly my point. Go ahead and announce a result. I mean, until you tell these political actors that if there is violence, if there is manipulation, rigging, we'll cancel the results and there will be no rerun. That's when you put a stop to this shenanigan. You know, but to my mind, and to the minds of most people that I've spoken to about this, if you keep rewarding electoral offenders, because this is a crime, if you keep rewarding them with a second bite at the cherry to coming through the back door, as it were. You know, because if you deny people the right to freely choose, you know, who governs them by sleight of hand, you know, by underhand tactics, then you will never have good governance. You know, because a former president of the United States, Bill Clinton, says good politics ultimately will result in good governance, because you would have buy-in of the electorate. But if the electorate feel, you know, that we have been robbed, we have been cheated, this is not the outcome of you know, that we envisaged, you know, you lose their buy-in. They just sit back and watch you do what you're doing. You know, so until INEC, that's the point I said earlier. INEC has got to stick to its own guidelines, its own policy. You do not reward electoral gamesmanship. You do not reward, you know, sleight of hand, you know, with another opportunity where they now have the capacity to deploy state resources. And we're not just talking about security apparatus of money. I mean, we were all witnesses to what went down in Lagos, you know, 2 days before, you know, March 9th elections. Bullion vans, we saw it. You know, so how many bullion vans do you know? Is it just because we saw the one in Lagos? You know, I mean, in Kano last week, preparatory to this rerun on Saturday, I saw on TV, you know, a memo purportedly from the office of the governor, you know, to set to the specific 6 or so local governments where this rerun in Kano is going to take place, you know, of huge sums of money. Now, suddenly they know they want to do projects, because when they interviewed, you know, a spokesperson for the Kano state government, he said, oh, this funds maybe it's been approved before, but it's just now it's been released for them to do certain projects. What a coincidence. That's such a beautiful and wonderful coincidence. You know, and I wish our public institution was so effective, you know, that money is approved and it is released immediately. You know, so when you give a room for this rerun, not only do you give room for political actors, you know, to deploy state resources in terms of security and all of that, but to influence votes. So people sell their votes, and that is not democracy. You know, that can be democracy. If the ballot box is not sacred, the sanctity of the ballot box is a critical element of true democracy. And if the ballot box is subject to manipulations, is subject to rigging, is subject to fraudulent practices, that is no longer democracy, you know.
Well, Mr. Oluwade, you will also agree that it will be presumptuous to just assume that the violence by politicians truncating votes from certain areas is, if INEC were to presume that because a party is leading, then it's not that party that caused violence, I'm sure INEC would be in a much more trouble and credibility crisis if they just made that kind of presumption. Because politicians in Nigeria, yes, you say orchestrated, we know that, but it is not the preserve of one political party. So it will be presumptuous for INEC also to assume that because one party is leading slightly, so they are not the likely party that caused violence, and go ahead to announce results on the basis of that presumption.
Emmanuel, with due respect to you, I disagree with you entirely. And I will give you 2 quick examples. In Kano State, everything went on smoothly, relatively so speaking, until the elections in Nasarawa local government. Now what happened in Nasarawa local government in Kano State? The deputy governor, the sitting deputy governor, and the commissioner for local government affairs, and another person went there. Once they saw, because there's the gap between, you know, the PDP, Yusuf, and Ganduje of APC is about 26,000. So once they saw, because I told you, you know, I'm not a politician, I've never been a politician, I don't belong to any political party, but I strategize for them, I advise them, so I know the way they think. You know, I can put myself in their minds. I know the way these guys think. You know, you can never, you know, fathom the depths these guys will go to. So a deputy governor, sitting deputy governor, went there, you know, with thugs and, you know, orchestrated violence, which was recorded. Emmanuel, I'm not cooking this up. He was arrested by the commissioner of police in Kano State with the urchins. And then, of course, what happened? He's been let go because he has so-called immunity to perpetrate crime. You know, like I said, so don't say that it will be preposterous, it will be presumptuous. There's no presumptuousness here. You know, APC deputy governor went to Nasarawa local government and incidented violence. It's straight away, okay, let's go to Rivers State. what happened in Rivers State? In the first place, APC, because of this same attitude of brigandage and lawlessness, could not field, not even House of Assembly members, House of Rep members, senatorial candidates. They couldn't field candidates for the gubernatorial election because of this same attitude of lawlessness. And we're talking about intra-party, within their own party. They could not manage their affairs, and so the Supreme Court said, yes, you cannot field elections because the High Court, in Rivers State said stay action until I determine the substantive case. But they went ahead anyway. Who cares about the rule of law in a democracy? We don't give a hoot about the rule of law. And then the case went up anyway, so they couldn't present candidates for the gubernatorial. But what happened? The PD went there. I mean, we all saw it. The last primaries they did, and the president was seated there. The APC chairman and the party hierarchy, they were all there. And the Minister for Transport said, if Wike wants war, that's the governor, we're bringing war to him. And I thought the president should have risen to the level of a statesman, seized the moment, and said, no, I disagree with my minister. Please pardon him. He's just been exuberant. This is politics. This is not war. All of you go out and vote for whoever you need. I know he's feeling bad because we're not. That is what I expect. But the president did not do that. Of course, they all lapped it up. And you saw what played out in Rivers State. APC was not on the ballot, but they fomented big-time trouble. And then, of course, 2 days before, they said, we're supporting maybe AAC or whatever, And then, who has the power, Emmanuel, to deploy the military? Minister Amechi is not the chief of army. He's not the commander-in-chief. So they deployed the military. So why do you say you don't know which party is doing what? Let's be honest, Emmanuel. So INEC knows, because if there is one of the, rays of hope in all of this is that, okay, INEC finally seems to have realized that if you keep tolerating all these shenanigans, you will lose every shred, every modicum of respect and reputation that the previous INEC built over in the last 2015 elections. So what did you have over the weekend? INEC, in addressing the Rivers debacle, said it deplores the role the military played. The PDP deployed the military. Emmanuel, it's the APC that deployed the military. Aptitko Abaka, the candidate of the PDP, warned the military hierarchy that you don't have to obey, what he called illegal instruction. But I don't blame the army because they obey the army is an hierarchy. Yeah, they take instructions from the the commander-in-chief, and they simply carried out. The commander-in-chief who said anybody who cuts away ballot box, should be ready to pay with his or her life, and that he's given the army, the command, the instruction to deal ruthlessly. Never mind what the provisions of the Criminal Act says about whoever, cuts away ballot box or foments trouble, maybe 3 years or whatever. You say, no, let them pay with their lives. So we know how these things are done. I've told you, Emmanuel, let's hold up to the fact. We are trying to salvage this democracy so that this democracy is not thrown overboard. Because if this is democracy, there are some fundamental principles in a democratic society. Checks and balances, separation of powers, the rule of law, sanctity of the ballot box. We trivialize these things, but it's amazing. Do you know how people see us? Foreigners in this country, diplomats in this country, foreign, embassies in this place, how do you think they see us? Because institutions of states, another fundamental principle of democracy, must be independent, not just in name. They must be seen to be independent. Because if you have the FBI stand up to Donald Trump in America, James Comey, former FBI director, said, no, I can't swear allegiance to you. My allegiance is the Constitution of America. If you have the Justice Department in the US setting up a probe and indicting almost everybody around a sitting president in America, then you will know that the institutions there are independent. What do you have here? You have an attorney general here who is actually meddling. And that's the only ministerial office that is enshrined, named in the Constitution. So, of course, you have good governance. But if you do not have any of these previous 5 principles I mentioned, you can never have good governance. So we've got to learn in the public space to say the truth, no matter whose hawks is God. I'm not a PDP member. I'm just a public affairs analyst. People are watching locally and internationally, and they need to know the truth. And the truth sometimes may be inconvenient, but the truth is truth. It's constant.
Okay, let's talk about one truth that the police put out about the comment you made earlier. Out of everybody that was said to be arrested, well, they said the deputy governor was rescued from a collation center, while the local government chairmen were arrested. Let's just put that fact there. Okay, moving on to my question now. There are allegations.
Adesua, do you believe that, Adesua? Do you believe
That's
that?
the statement by the police. It's not left for me to believe, Mr. Oluwade. It's the statement by the Kano State Police Command.
Okay.
Oh, just to clear that.
Okay.
My question now to you, because we're talking about the independence of INEC, we've seen allegations and counter-allegations by the two main parties against INEC concerning the supplementary elections. I mean, the APC is blowing hot, the PDP is blowing hot. In fact, the APC described the situation in Rivers as illegal. It is left to be seen if they take any legal actions. But, you know, there are these allegations. What does this say about the independence of INEC? Should that not be reprieve of some sort? Should that be music to the ears of those who think INEC is compromised, our votes don't count? What is the need? I mean, if the two major political parties going into the race seem to be shouting, huffing and puffing, is that good music to the ears for the Nigerian voter?
No, I don't think so, because it can be good news to my own ears anyway. Because what is the business of APC in Rivers elections? That's the question we should ask. You are not on the ballot. The crisis in Rivers is an orchestration to arrive at where we are. If APC had its way, the AAC candidate would have been declared winner. And the outcome would have been go to court. They would do it and damn the consequences. However, INEC was able to retrieve some level of dignity to stop what was going on March 9th or the next day, March 10th, to say, you know what, we suspend collation because the military overpowered, you know, there was some level of resistance by the police who manned the collation center. And the military got there, overpowered the police, and took over, chased away the local and foreign observers. I'm not telling you stories, I'm telling you what is in the public domain. Took over the place and began to do all sorts of things with the objective of returning, you know, the adopted political party, the AAC candidates and the party of the AAC. But for the quick intervention of INEC, I don't know what happened. They would have gotten away with it. Because what would have happened is, oh, they would have said, well, APC supporters voted for AAC. So if PDP is not happy, go to court. Because from the beginning, it's in the public glare. There is nothing hidden about it. The determination has been to remove the sitting governor, make sure he never gets a second term. I'm not a Rivers man. I'm not interested in whatever. But I'm only interested in this democracy that we claim to be practicing. You are not on the ballot. So allow, you know, those who are on the ballot to have their contest. But because this is Nigeria where it seems like anything can happen, everything goes. You know, so we shouldn't sit down here and say the two major parties. APC has no business in what is going on in Rivers State. They should not be in the conversation. So for we to begin to entertain APC saying INEC is biased, the question you should say, what is your... Okay, if you go to the law court to fight a case, there's what is called, you know, interest. The question is, what is your motive? What is your interest? You can't have, you don't have an interest in the matter, so why are you joined in the case? APC has no business. Yes, of course, you know, APC members are electorates, but your party, you're not fielding or candidates. So why are you so bothered? But because the agenda all along is to make sure the PDP candidate does not return as governor. And I think that is sad, you know, because the conversation about our electoral system is how to deepen democratic practices, you know, so that we do not talk about, you know, thuggery, violence, and then there will be no excuse whatsoever for the need for policemen, either armed or unarmed. You know, we should be able to, I mean, election ought to be a carnival-like atmosphere. But of course, when elections have become do or die, elections have become a kind of warfare, you know, and of course, so you see what we're witnessing all over, you know, the states. You know, because at the end of the day, you know, people have lost their lives. At the last count, 100 plus, you know, so the dead are burying their dead. But those who have won political office, move on. And I keep asking, at what cost? At what cost? You know, how many months now, maybe 2 months now, we've shut down the economy. The economy has been, you know, relegated to the background. We're talking about people, individuals, contesting for political office to, as it were, serve us. If you want to serve us, you want to be our servants, you want to be, you know, our employees, do you have to kill us to be our employees, to be our servants? You know, I don't know.
Mr. Oluwade, you know, you're a public affairs analyst, and you have said, you know the minds of the politicians, you work for them, you strategize for them. But let me ask you, did the stakes get higher? Why did we see so much violence and disruptions in this round of elections like we've never seen before? What changed?
Well, unfortunately, what changed is leadership is everything in any human endeavor. Leadership is everything. When President Buhari came in 2015, there was this phrase, body language. As in a sharp contrast to his predecessor, former President Goodluck Jonathan, who repeatedly avowed that my ambition is not worth the blood of any individual. I would rather lose political office, than have, electorates or innocent Nigerians lose their life for my sake. And let me tell you, that statement was not just off the cuff. It wasn't just one-off. Every time, the likes of Adams Oshiomhole, the current president of, chairman of the APC, he contested under Goodluck Jonathan. And he was, the President Jonathan allowed, free space for the conduct of elections in Edo State so that Adams Oshiomhole could win. And whenever, PDP ox then, came to President Jonathan to say, oh, let us do this. I mean, he always told them, of course, there's some level of, he would allow them, but certain level, he would not allow them go that far. So it's about the personality, the character, the mindset, the belief system, of individuals now, especially the leader. Because I said it yesterday, and I have to repeat myself. If President Jonathan had deployed the instruments of state, because see, the presidency is so powerful. The presidency of Nigeria is, the power it wields is so enormous that if you have the Michelin tire advert says, power under control. If you are not one who has restraint, if you are not a committed Democrat in a presidential system of governance, especially in Africa, and particularly so in Nigeria, where states that ordinarily ought to act as a buffer against executive excesses, where the institutions of states are weak, where they are prone to the whims and caprices of whoever wields such powers, either as president or governor, but especially at the presidential level, then you would have what we have. So when your sidekicks, your foot soldiers come to you with some of these sinister ideas, these dark intentions, and you don't tell them, no, this is not right, we can't do this. Yeah, you can do politics, you can say all sorts of things, you can, I would wink some of these things, but for me to deploy military, no, I can't do that. For me to allow you to say some of these things, it's tantamount to hate speech. I can't do that. The genocide in Rwanda, was caused by hate speech, calling people cockroaches and all that, and we saw all of that played out. I just told you about what transpired in Rivers. The president sat down. The campaign rally at Port Harcourt, he was there. The party, of course, the way the APC chairman talks is so coarse, so crude, so vulgar in his rhetorics. And he makes no bones about it. He's not apologetic about it. But the president of Nigeria, the father figure, a statesman, I expected him, I keep saying it, to have taken the microphone, or whenever it was his turn to speak, to have said, no, we're not here for war. We're here for politics. And I understand my minister is frustrated, he's not happy because we're not on the ballot. So please, Rivers people, you are my people. Go out and vote. Let me go a step further. Assuming the president from the stadium took Minister Amechi and went to Governor Wike's office and said, the two of you hug each other, shake each other. You are brothers. This is not war. Don't let your people die because of your own ambitions. If you don't get it now, you'll get it another time. Okay, take pictures. Let the whole world see that there's no war. At this war, what do you think would have happened in these elections? We will not be talking here that, hundreds of people lost their lives needlessly in these elections. So if you have, as it were, a body language, and then not just body language, I watched the president, a CNN interviewer, asked him, what would happen? You unseated your predecessor. If you're unseated, he said, no, I can't, nobody will unseat me. And then on the day of elections, it was put to him again after I cast his vote that, sir, if you lose these elections, would you congratulate your winner? He said, no, I'm not going to lose, and I'm not going to congratulate him, I will congratulate myself. That is not the attitude. Even if you're so confident, you're so cocksure that you cannot lose, you would at least say that, of course, if this is a contest, it could be this way or that way. If I lose, of course, I'll pick up the phone and call whoever I might. But to say outrightly, I cannot win, that is a do or die. That is either I win or nobody else gets it. That is the the spirit, that is the attitude that permeated, the entire atmosphere. So what changed? Why do we have this spike in violence? That is it. Because if you don't set the leadership is key. It's very, very critical. So, and I urge the president now, because I said yesterday, I'm saying it again. You see, in Africa, we are so short-term. And that's why we have this development, debacle where we're caught up in a time warp, as it were. The rest of the world is gone on 100 years, 200 years. We are still stuck in a time warp, living in a Stone Age existence. And we think we're doing something. We're not doing anything. We're just going around in circles. So leaders in Africa, think about 4 years, 2 years. They don't think about legacy. They don't think about posterity. I'm appealing to President Muhammadu Buhari. He's won this second term. So it's time for him to put away politics and begin to be a statesman. I said yesterday, and I'm saying it now, there's no reason why he can't put a call through to Vice President Atiku Abubakar, and say, you're my brother, let's work together. There's no reason why President Buhari can't actually drive and say, see, I'm coming to visit you, not because I want you to drop your contest in the tribunal. You can go ahead. If you win, fine, no problem. But I just want us to bring this nation together. Let's heal this land. Let's close the chasm, the deep divide. Because you won the election, as it were, but nobody is rejoicing. Except for a few street urchins, celebrating and killing each other and falling into all sorts of places. You won, but then it's like there is mourning, and you won. So if you are a statesman, you rise up to the state of a statesman, to the level of a statesman, and provide leadership, galvanize the people, heal this land, and put away all this childishness, of giving approval. I'm glad, of course, I saw this morning that he said, I'm not going to game the system. I'm not going to help you to talk to INEC or whatever. I want to see the president, my own president, say to the military, you have no role to play in these reruns, and tell the police IG, tell your men to sheath their sword. Let the contest be free and fair. Let whoever wins. So that's it at this way. That's what happened.
All right, Mr. Oluwade, coming down to reality as we actually build up to the supplementary elections, is violence now a part and parcel of our electoral process? Or do you think it's an anomaly that should be fought vehemently?
Violence has no place in democracy. I just said that, Aaron. Violence is anathema. The whole idea of people fighting over electoral contests. Where do you see that play out, Aaron? Because the reason why votes are cast in the morning and the votes drag on interminably and then collation becomes another nightmare is because people are so hell-bent. Of course, we can't even begin to talk about why do political players adopt this do-or-die mentality, which is, of course, because there is no accountability in governance. There is a difference between being in government and being, and providing actual governance. Most of what transpires in the three different tiers of governance architecture, local government, state, and the presidency, is a joke, actually. You have people in government who are observing the motions, and performing tokenisms, as it were. So they receive traditional rulers, so tomorrow they receive labor union, so they go to this seminar, then tomorrow they declare this state function open, and then, there's a crisis, Boko Haram, there's a crisis, labor. So that is what we do 4 years. Before you know it, 4 years has gone. Then we start, by the time a sitting governor or president realizes that, I haven't done much, really, in terms of actual governance. Let me tell you, there's a study done by the Earth Foundation, a United States think tank headed by Professor Jeffrey Sachs. And the study was about the exemplary performance of the Nordic, the Scandinavian countries, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, and Iceland. And what did they find out? 3 simple things. Number one, the number one factor in the exemplary governance is high-quality governance. People just sit down, roll their sleeves, and do the work for which you have been elected. Not to go there and just be observing the motions, the razzmatazz. Because what I see in Nigeria is, just carrying agbada all over the place and say, I'm the Excellency. Of course, before you make a speech of 1 page to address a governor, you must put Your Excellency 50 times. If he's president 75 times, and you must say, Commander-in-Chief of the Federal. For goodness sake, have you ever had President Trump being addressed as President of the United States, Commander-in-Chief? All this silliness. Can't we just sit down, be serious, for goodness sake? So if there is accountability If people are actually serious and to sit down and do the job, you will not have most of these jokers who come into political offices. You would have serious-minded people. But of course, this is Africa, this is Nigeria. So people get there, there is no accountability, there is no governance. So if there is no governance, you have given somebody a job and he's not doing the job, he must find something for himself to do. So they get involved in all sorts of things. Violence can never be a part of our political culture. If this democracy is going to survive and thrive going forward, we have to speak to politicians. And that's why I go back to the president. This is the time for him to begin to demonstrate, in practical terms, preach the gospel. Because, see, you may accuse former President Jonathan of anything. The singular, action of conceding defeat even before final votes tally, and to stay by his avowed commitment that my ambition is not worth the blood. That is that is the conduct of a true Democrat. And one single action seemed to have, glossed over whatever inadequacies he has, and he has them plenty. I know, because I'm not a fan of President Jonathan. But that singular saved this nation. And I thought we'll have built incrementally going forward. So we need to begin to talk to politicians. And it also speaks to how do we recruit leaders. If we don't recruit somebody who is serious-minded, who is ready to work, if all you can do is to recruit somebody who is going to wear agbada, because every profession in the world that I know, that there is a uniform for every profession. Even if you're the #1 surgeon in the world, and you're going into a hospital, you can't wear agbada to go into a hospital, for goodness sake. You can't wear the attire of the EFIC or the BBO to go. You have to dress, there is a uniform, because the work demands a certain sobriety, a certain sense of comportment. But when you have the drama that is going on here, a governor has a convoy of 18 vehicles to do what, for goodness sake? And so that person can work. Because all you're doing, is how to steal money, how to play to the gallery, how to do seminar and all those. But can you sit down, because we have the highest level of poverty in the world? A governor in some part of Southwest now that I'm interested in, just the other day said, is commissioning rehabilitation of 322 primary health care centers. And he just took over last year. I'm asking. So the previous man, what did he do for 8 years? If you are going to rehabilitate 322 primary health care centers. So the man was there for 8 years. We're talking of primary health care centers. At the ward or local government level. So what was the man for 8 years? What was he doing? So you go to the states, you see the roads are bad. The roads are unmotorable. The schools, the list goes on. So violence cannot be tolerated. So it's a multi-pronged approach. We need to preach to political actors to tone down their rhetorics, to behave themselves, to be responsible. And even us as electorate, our political party system, how do we recruit people? Is it just money bags? Is it someone who is connected? Is it the role of godfathers? Or we allow people who actually have the passion, those who are patriotic about this nation, come into politics and change this society? Because whether you like it or not, I can't talk about America or UK or whatever. It's a travesty to compare Nigeria to all. Let's talk about Rwanda. Can you imagine what is going on in Rwanda, even just after 25 years post-genocide? Look at the leap, the quantum leap of Rwanda. And here we are still battling with, mundane issues. Things, it befuddles my mind.
Okay, Mr. Oluwade, you seem to have wrapped a lot around the body language of the president. But the president has come out today, and you acknowledge it, to say that he's not going to influence or help anybody in the supplementary elections coming up on Saturday. Now, what do you expect to see for us to have a credible supplementary election, step 1, 2, 3? Because you mentioned the Osun case study. So what do you expect to see on Saturday so that that election will be credible?
Thank you, Emmanuel. Yes, I acknowledge that the president had said that's the beginning, and that's a good starting point. So I expect a clear directive to the IG that because don't forget, part of the intention, the proposals in the Electoral Amendments Act bill that the president did not sign was to say all security agencies on the day of election are answerable to the chairman of INEC. So I expect the president to tell the IG of police. We're not even talking about the military, because the military is the presence of the military is anathema. It should never be. So we're talking about the police now, because between the police and the civil defense, we have enough men to cater for security. So tell your men to be professional. So the police and the civil defense should be professional. I expect that politicians also will conduct themselves. You know, the issue of VIPs, I mean, governors, because when you have these isolated cases, and I'm talking from Osun, I'm talking about Ekiti, when you have these isolated cases where elections are conducted off-season, what you have is governors, restless governors, you know, they feel sympathy for their brother governors because maybe party loyalty or whatever. And so they mobilize to go there to that state on election day, you know, begin to do all sort of underhand, you know, tactics. We should not allow that. INEC has got to come out, you know, from today, begin to have a daily briefings and tell these political players you are not needed. If you are not a card, you don't have a PVC on election day, and you are not INEC official or ad hoc staff, you have no business anywhere near the polling units. Not to talk of collation center. I expect INEC to do a daily briefing from today until Saturday. And of course, you know, I expect also, you know, to see Nigerians, electorates, not to be, you know, to cave in to the fear that we don't know what will happen. Because of course, if Nigerians see that, you know, the military will be deployed, or there's a subsistence of the order to the military or the police that anyone who foments trouble will be shot at sight, Nigerians won't come out. So I also expect Nigerians to come out in those states. Some of those states, I don't think anybody needs to motivate them. Bedouin people, I don't think they need any further motivation because it's about survival of their way of life, their culture, their land. You know, so they need to come out and see, you know, the process that already began, see it through to completion. That's what I think should happen.
Mr. Oluwade, just before we let you go, the military, INEC is the final arbiter, so to say, to indict the military in the conduct of elections, especially in Rivers State. The military, before now, had denied all the allegations, although it has set up a committee to investigate. What do you expect would be the outcome of that committee? Well,
I know they denied it, but what they cannot deny is what we all saw. And if you say unknown soldiers, you know, I grew up in Lagos for some, you know, number of years, and at the time when Fela's house somewhere in Mushin was ransacked and people were killed and maimed, and they said, who did it? They said they were unknown soldiers. So we are in the era of unknown. But anyway, these so-called unknown soldiers, also they were able to get military fatigue, which all of us can buy in the open market. But they were also able to get armored personnel carriers and barricade the roads and semi-automatic rifles and all of that. Please, Adesua, don't listen to all of that. That's hogwash. But that's not the point. The point is that, okay, so the army, based on the weight of evidence presented to it, deemed it fit to set up its own panel of investigation. So I would expect at the minimum that panel will be given the latitude to conduct a transparent investigation, and that it will not just be another sham, another panel that is working to answer, so that just say, oh, we told you, we don't know about it, because you cannot tell even a schoolboy in Nigeria, don't talk of somebody like me, that Iraq, some strange military men from nowhere came with armored, even Boko Haram, Adesua, cannot get armored personnel carrier and ride unmolested, unchallenged onto the streets of Port Harcourt. That is unthinkable. You know, so at the minimum, I expect this investigative panel set up by the Chief of Army, and I commend him for that. You know, but I expect it to be thorough. I expect it to be fair, to be transparent, and then whatever the outcome should be made public. There should be nothing hidden. We want to know, because I told you, INEC itself deplored, could not hide it, had to deplore the role the soldiers played in the fiasco that happened in Rivers State. Indeed. It's been an interesting time with you this morning on the show. Many thanks, Mr. Wale Oluwade, Public Affairs Analyst. Much appreciated. Thank you very much, Adesua. Thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you, Aaron.